Good morning. This is Matt Mangriotis from Cambium Networks. I am going to talk to you guys about cnRanger today. We have a lot of new exciting stuff coming out, and we'll present what we have, and then I'll take some Q&A at the end. I expect this to be a fairly short webinar this morning, but we will post this in the forum along with the slides, and you have an opportunity to ask questions after the fact in our forum. Welcome, and let's get going without further ado. So again, my name is Matt Mangriotis. I'm product manager for the cnRanger product line, in addition to 450, which some of you may be familiar with as well. With cnRanger, we're really here to give you something easy to deploy, something as easy as our other point-to-multipoint product lines, but using the LTE protocol to do so. We have a complete portfolio now of devices. In the 2.5 and 3, we will be launching the 3 gigahertz range very shortly here. And so that's what we're going to focus on today. But we do have 2.5 gigahertz that's been out for about a year. And we have the suite of products that you see on the slide now. We will be talking about each one of these individually. So I'm going to skip this slide for the moment and talk about the bands that we cover. We do cover 2 gig. As I mentioned, 2.5 gigahertz, which is 2.3 all the way to 2.7, just about. That's bands 38, 40, and 41, if you're familiar with the TD-LTE bands as they're laid out in the standard. In the US, this includes the EBS band, the Education Broadband Service band. And elsewhere, most of 2 gigahertz is licensed. And again, this is TDD, a TDD system. In 3 gigahertz, we are covering now bands 42 and 43, which are the traditional WiMAX bands that have moved to LTE and will therefore, strategically move towards the 5G bands as well, and the newly formed band 48, or the CBRS band in the US. And so we are, with our 3 gigahertz products, we are CBRS Part 96 certified, and we will be pursuing OnGo certification as well, if you're familiar with that. The BBU is the same BBU that we're using, and it can be used with either 2 gigahertz or 3 gigahertz products, RRHs, for instance. And that BBU is kind of the base unit controller, baseband unit. It contains our integrated or embedded EPC, which has all of the functions. We'll talk about that on the next slide, but it contains all the functions of the EPC, which normally you'd need to host in your NOC, and all the traffic would go through that EPC, but that's contained in each BBU. It is a rack-mounted unit, and it does support up to 4 channels, so 4 2x2 channels, if you will. Currently, we support 192 SMs across 3 RRHs, but we're improving that and to support more CPEs per channel, as well as a fourth channel there, or a 4th sector. It's powered by DC. So talking about the EPC a little bit, as I mentioned, our radio system is much simpler than LTE, traditional LTE, because we're a purpose-built fixed wireless solution, and not necessarily a mobile solution that's been downgraded to support fixed. We have all of these functions of what normally is your evolved packet core embedded in that EPC, which means we have the management for the UEs. We have the HSS, the home subscriber service. We have the gateways, the serving gateway and packet gateway, all embedded in that BBU. And those instances where you have a database that helps manage those CPEs that are connected, that's replicated among all the BBUs in your network via cnMaestro. So our cnMaestro overarching NMS works with the cnRanger product line to help propagate that information across your network. And so the EPC, there's nothing necessary at the NOC, and the data, in fact, will only go to that BBU if that's as far as it needs to go. If you're talking to another CPE attached to that same BBU, that data does not need to go all the way through your NOC like it would with a normal EPC. So again, embedded EPC in your BBU saves a lot of trouble, a lot of hassle. But what you lose in that case is the mobility aspect. We're not supporting mobility at this time. because that's isolated to each BBU. So we can't hand over a signal without breaking that relationship first and then reestablishing the relationship with another BBU. So it's still possible to move subscribers from one to the other, but that's not the intent of this product line. This is truly a fixed wireless product line. Now, we'll get to a little bit in the future about what we could support going forward, because we have the ability to do so as an LTE system. So the newest deployment in this relationship or in this system is the 3 gigahertz remote radio head. We're calling that the 210, the 210 remote radio head. This again supports bands 42, 43, and 48. And it's a 1 watt per port device. It's a little bit lower power than the 2 gig because that's all the power that's allowed, especially in the CBRS band. It gets to about the maximum that you can deploy in that band. It's a 17 dBi antenna. It's a 90-degree sector, is the one that we sell. You can hook up other antennas, other sector antennas to it, but the one that Cambium provides that has with can support. It's a 90-degree sector and it's a 17 dBi antenna. So again, this mounts that radio will mount to the antenna with attached, the included, I should say, bracket kit as well. And then on the 2 gig side, which has been out again for about a year, we are seeing some traction and some pickup from a lot of customers using this now. We have a similar deployment, meaning we have a remote radio head that's sold, as well as the sector antenna. It's again a 90-degree sector. You may notice that the sector antenna for 2 gig is significantly larger than the 3 gig, and that's true because of the lower frequency. It's a 16 dBi antenna, and it's capable of all the same kind of features, a 90-degree sector. As far as the subscriber modules go, we've launched now the 201 subscriber module for 3 gigahertz. We launched that back in December, and we've been selling that without our remote radio head because this is an LTE compatible SM that can be paired with other manufacturers' LTE equipment as well. So this CPE or this SM is already being sold, the 3 gigahertz. It's got a 21 dBi attached dish, and it supports all the same bands with 23 dBm TX power. It's a category 6, which means it can support 2 carrier aggregation. We do have customers that are using it in that scenario because it's got 2 receivers and 1 transmitter. We are now launching the 2 gigahertz version of this as well, meaning it looks very similar. It's got the same form factor, but it's got a 2 gigahertz radio inside. This one is a little bit more unique in the fact that it has 3 dB of higher transmit power than the standard. It goes up to 26 dBm. This helps a lot with uplink, where you're always in trouble in LTE land with uplink. Uplink is always a bit starved because it's a mobile standard that's been brought to fixed wireless. Generally with mobile systems, you want that downlink to be really powerful, and you don't care so much about the uplink because you're trying to get data to a handset. But in this case, a more balanced link is oftentimes better when you're at a fixed position and you're trying to do things like, Zoom meetings and things, or video surveillance, where you need a little bit heavier or a more robust uplink pipe. So that 3 dB extra power kind of helps in that scenario. So that 2 gigahertz SM is coming out at the beginning of next month, in a few weeks here, and we're getting the stock ready to go at the distribution centers, at our distribution centers now. The 101 SM, which has been around for a while, is still available for sale, and that's a little bit lower cost, but it is category 4, so it won't support carrier aggregation. But again, it does include that 3 dB extra power, so it's a smaller form factor, 14 dBi integrated antenna, and as I mentioned, very low cost. So this one can help if you don't need that extra gain, then you can use this guy, or don't need carrier aggregation, you can use this guy at a lower cost. And this one has been out for about a year now. Deployment-wise, again, I mentioned there's the BBU and the remote radio head. They're separate pieces, so it's kind of a flexible deployment strategy or a split mount architecture. You have one at the base of the tower, typically, the BBUs down at the base, and then you have the remote radio heads out on the tower, what this means is you have a fiber cable that connects, a CPRI standard fiber cable that connects that remote radio head to the BBU, and then you have an uplink port from that BBU to the rest of your network, to a switch, to a whatever you're deploying out to your network POP. And that means you have no tower climb needed to access that BBU, so keep that operational expense low. Another aspect of this is that it's very simple to use operationally. It is very familiar. If you're familiar with other fixed network deployments, very similar in look and feel to cnMaestro, as well as maybe EPMP or even 450. 450 is a little bit more engineering-ish looking, a little bit more utilitarian. This one's got more of a polished GUI that's more along the lines of the cnMaestro. You don't really need to know the ins and outs of LTE to be able to use this product. And that integrated EPC is really automatically configured and cnMaestro helps manage that without really getting into the complexity of what you might need to do if you're doing kind of a true LTE or a traditional LTE type of deployment. One of the other differentiators we like to talk about in this space is that cnRanger, we've enabled what we call bridge mode. Typically with LTE equipment, it's layer 3 or tunneling through layer 3, GRE tunneling, that is used to transmit traffic. But what we've done is created kind of a bridge mode within our system to act more like a layer 2 bridge and make it transparent to your traffic. It's more flexible. It's more traditionally fixed wireless. A lot of folks like that, and so we've enabled that. And that's something that is pretty unique in this space. A lot of the LTE equipment say that they do that, and then it's clunky or it has some nuances that make it hard to use. With cnRanger, we found that most customers that are deploying this in a larger scale are enabling bridge mode and having great success doing so. Again, I mentioned cnMaestro as the management server. cnMaestro Cloud can manage this. It can manage all of the SIM credentials. You don't have to worry about replicating SIMs here and there or enabling SIMs at a specific site. Maestro helps manage that across the entire network. It helps manage firmware upgrades, obviously monitoring and dashboards and events. That's what it's there for. And it also serves as the domain proxy. If you're doing CBRS, you're going to have a way for those radios to contact the SAS in order to get set up and use for CBRS. And cnMaestro is required to use that with CBRS. But that's how we do it with the 450 system. That's also how we do it with cnRanger. And the nice thing is that it's the same from an externally use perspective. It's virtually the same as 450. So if you're familiar with how it's done with 450, you'll be familiar with how it's done with cnRanger. I would be remiss to say to not mention cnArcher here as well, as it does support all the cnRanger devices. So if you're deploying SMs using cnRanger, you can use Archer to do so. And Archer is our mobile phone app available for both Android and iOS. And cnArcher will help you do all the deployment from the beginning to the end. You can pre-configure parameters on the SM. You can align the SM, upgrade software if you need to, complete the configuration, and then record a baseline and upload that into Maestro or email it to your installer or your NOC. It really helps get things systematically deployed. A lot of folks are finding great use for using this product, and it keeps getting better. We keep releasing new features and new versions of this software for both Android and iOS that'll help reduce time and reduce errors on installation. So cnArcher is a great way to do this. So here's the roadmap, and when I say roadmap, it's a plan of intent. It is subject to change. I always qualify those statements because things change. We don't always are able to do what we want to do, and things may move in time. Just to give you a kind of a legend here, the dark blue boxes are ones that we're making great progress on and are committed to doing, and we have pretty solid dates on those. Light blue means it's still in planning and things may shift in and out of those and the date may move a little. And the yellow boxes means that it's we're evaluating what we can do in those instances. So the dates may shift more than a little, and things may move in and out of those as well. So I'm going to walk through a little bit about the roadmap and where we're headed. At the end of May here, in a couple weeks, we will have finished our 2.1 and released that. And that includes the new hardware, including the 3 gig RRH and the new 2 gig SM. And we will have added VLAN pass-through for bridge mode. So some of the things that, one of the things the customer requested was, hey, I'm using bridge mode, but now I need to use VLANs as well. And that's a little bit trickier with the way that it's done, but we've got that worked out, and it's will be released in 2.1. In 2.2, one of the big things is the carrier aggregation support that we talked about. So we will have the ability to do two 20 megahertz channels using a single RRH in 2.2, a single RRH per BBU. And I clarify that because in the next release, 2.3, we will add the ability to add a second remote radio head with 2 carrier aggregation. We will also in July, going back to 2.2, we will have the ability to support up to 4 sectors. As I mentioned, today we support 3, but in July we will be able to support 4 sectors and do n equals 2, which means you can have the same frequency back to back on either side. So an A-B type of frequency deployment. We will also support 5 and 15 megahertz channels by that release. And then in 2.3, we expect to complete on-go certification sometime between now and 2.3. And then we will also, you may notice the line there that says external EPC support. So we are entertaining the idea of how do we support an EPC if a customer already has an EPC, a centralized EPC, or a cloud-based EPC, how do we support that and enable the mobility aspect of things? Because we could, if we're using that EPC, the EPC is really controlling all of that handoff from sector to sector. And so could we do that? Yes, we could. And we're gonna figure out how and which ones we will support between now and the September timeframe. So we will be working on that. That'll really give us that ability to support these private LTE type of networks. Perhaps folks have started deploying with another vendor, and maybe they see some advantages to using Maestro and to using some of the features that we offer in our system. Because primarily, in a lot of these cases, it is a fixed deployment, but maybe we want to support some mobility, some UEs, some handsets that are moving back and forth, but the primary use case is a fixed wireless deployment, which cnRanger is much better suited for than some of the other vendors out there. And then in the future, we have some ideas of adding higher power RRHs for 2 gig, perhaps, increasing the number of SMs per sector, and even integrating the n equals 1 fractional frequency reuse ability. Those are things we're working on. But we don't have quite as firm a date around. Here's just a list of part numbers available with MSRP prices. Of course, these aren't the prices that most people pay for these things, but those are MSRP. You can talk to our partners. Our partners are all ready with all of this information and are taking orders now for all of that stuff. And that is about it from a slide perspective. And I do see that there's several questions that have come in. So I am going to go ahead and start answering those questions as I can. Let me expand my window a bit here, if I can. And I see there's a question or a comment that says, I heard you're developing an ability to support up to 4.2 gigahertz. We are working on perhaps supporting up to 4.2 gigahertz using the 450 series products, using the 3 gig 450 series products. We do not have any designs on supporting up to the frequency with the cnRanger products, mainly because there's no TD LTE bands that are defined for up to in that 4 gigahertz range. So that's not something that we believe there's a real big market for in any case. So that's that question. Will there be any case studies coming out with cnRanger? Yes, there will. We're working on some of those right now. So we are hopefully going to have some of those released very shortly. So keep an eye out for that. Can you mix 2 gigahertz and 3 gigahertz remote radio heads on the same BBU? Yes, you can. You can utilize different frequencies with the same BBU. Those are just 4 channels available. So if I want to put 2 remote radio heads on 2 gigahertz and 2 on 3 gigahertz, absolutely you can. Currently, there's a question about 5 gigahertz in there. We do not have any desire or plans to include a 5 gigahertz remote radio head at this time. 5 gigahertz, typically, we have actually several different product lines that support 5 gigahertz already. We believe that doing LTE in 5 gigahertz really doesn't buy you the same advantages that you have from a performance standpoint and a spectral efficiency standpoint as you do with the 450 system or EPMP for that matter. Does bridge mode enable you to give a public IP address to an SM? Yes, I believe it does. I'm not sure you want to do that in most cases, but I believe you can. If I'm wrong about that, we'll clarify that in the forum, but I believe that that is true. Do you have to use cnMaestro X to unlock specific features or functionality? So we have a product called cnMaestro Essentials, which is free to use, and it monitors and manages all of your network. There's also a product that is a subscription-based product called cnMaestro X, which adds more features, more functionalities, and is required for certain features in some product lines. In the cnRanger product line, there is no features tied to cnMaestro X at this time. So the answer to that is no, you do not need cnMaestro X to enable any features specific to the cnRanger product. I hope I was clear about that. If there's still questions, feel free to post them in the forum. Can you use locally hosted cnMaestro for control? There's 2 versions of cnMaestro. One is a cloud-based cnMaestro, and one is a on-premises version of cnMaestro. And you can use either one for any of the functions that cnMaestro provides. So you can do either way. Can you use a mobile phone with cnRanger if it supports the band that you're operating in? The answer is yes, you can. We need to, at the point where the mobile phone will be moving from sector to sector, it's going to, at this point, drop session and come back into session in a new sector. So it's not a mobile use case. You can't move that phone from one sector to the other. Within a sector, it can work, although that is not a typical deployment. This, again, is a fixed wireless system, and we really don't support any form of mobility today. Once we support that external EPC, and your mobile phone is now, authorized and registered to that external EPC, then it will work in a more seamless manner. There's a very specific VLAN question that I think we'll handle offline because, frankly, I don't know the answer to that right now. I believe the VLAN pass-through that we have, the radios themselves, the cnRanger radios don't do any tagging or untagging. There's no VLAN functionality. It's simply a pass-through in bridge mode. So it's not, the management VLAN is set beyond or behind the radios, and then it passes through the system. And there's one more question about kind of downlink and uplink speeds. I didn't really cover that, mainly because in LTE, it's pretty standard. If you have a 2x2 system in 20 megahertz, there's only a very limited number of configurations that you can do with LTE. It's kind of standards based. And we are about the same as every other piece of LTE equipment out there. In that scenario, let's use that as an example. In a 20 megahertz channel, using LTE frame config 1, let's say, we're at about 110 megs of aggregate throughput, and 90 megs of that is downlink. So it's between 15 and 20 megs uplink, and that's split across as many of the SMs as you have, and that's pretty typical for a 2x2 20 megahertz channel in LTE. I hope that answers your question. If you have more detail that is required, please feel free to type some more. I'll wait just a minute on here and see if any more questions come in, but I think I've answered everything that I see there. And I really appreciate your time. thanks for joining me today, and look forward to talking to you guys again about all the other new things that are upcoming in the web. Thanks again.